Hello and welcome to MEL Make Stuff. My name is Melissa and this is my Knit City Montreal recap. I want to thank you for coming back for part 2 after the cliffhanger in my last video. I actually didn't intend to leave you on a cliffhanger. I was going to show you the outfit so that anybody going to the festival would be able to identify me, but it got so close to the time I needed to go that I figured, I'll just edit everything, do it the right way, hopefully, later on. So without further ado, here is some footage of the outfit that I made. The pants are the Arthur pants by So Liberated. I made a number of adjustments to these, including a real shortening of the leg length by 5 inches. I changed all of the seams from flat felled and French seamed into just normal sewn and serged and top stitched to the side seams. Although my measurements put me in an 8, I sized down to a 4 to just take some of the volume out of the back of these pants where there is a half elastic waist, and I think that that was relatively successful. I think that I still have plenty of room in here to move around and sit comfortably, but there's just not quite as much bunching in the back. The pattern as written has some square pockets, patch pockets for the back, and I left those off. And I also added belt loops. The other change that I made, which I described in the last video, was to remove the tab front that is drafted for the pattern, and I just made it sort of a regular squared off front, like a normal pair of fly front pants. The fabric that I used for these is the Robert Kaufman Essex metallic linen in the emerald colorway. This fabric isn't particularly soft, but I wouldn't consider it scratchy either. Just something to keep in mind if you are sensitive to the softness of fabrics, this probably isn't for you, but I am not sensitive and I find it to be totally fine. And for this vest, which is self-drafted and I talked extensively about in the last video, I'm actually going to get on the other side of the camera and take this off so I can show you more of the finished details. Alright, so here we have the finished vest. I have worn this, so I wore it at the festival and I've worn it maybe twice since then. I haven't washed and blocked it again. I just give it a good airing out after each time I wear it, and still seems to be doing fine. As we're going through this, I'm going to assume that we've all seen the previous video that was the making of this vest so that I don't get too into the nitty-gritty here, but I want to make sure to show you guys the insides of this and some close-up details of how some of these things turned out. As far as the finishings, you may recall I did a folded hem with a little picot turning row, which is very subtle but still nice. I did the same thing at the neck. For the armholes, I just picked up stitches, knit a few rounds, and then sewed down the live stitches on the inside. And then to finish the fronts before I put the zipper in, I used a technique that I learned about from an Irish crochet lace book, where I basically used crochet to create a little cord that got attached as I went to the front of the garment, and then that cord is what I ended up sewing to the zipper. Because I had a folded hem at both the top and the bottom of this, I was able to fold that hem over and sew it down to the inside of the zipper, just to give a neat finish on the front. Here is what that looks like at the bottom of the zipper. So here's a little shot of the inside of the garment. As you can see, I did not end up lining it. At first it was because I didn't have enough time to do it before the festival, but now I actually think I'm going to leave it unlined because I like how stretchy it is. I am wearing this with no ease to a little bit of negative ease, and so I don't want to do anything in here that is going to affect the fit, and I like the way it's able to stretch over my body now with it being unlined. Here you can see the inside of my folded hem. I did use the main color yarn to sew the hem down. This is the Jamieson Shetland Spindrift in the olive colorway, and then the contrast color is Jamieson and Smith FC6 mix, which is sort of a heathered corally pink. So you will probably remember that I used a new type of steek for me. I have never done this type of steek before. It is a knotted steek where the ends, once you cut the steek, you knot the ends together, and then I just ended up pulling them through one of the floats on the back so they would lay flat, which they did. I didn't have any problems with any of these in, well, the front was closed by the zipper, but I did the same thing for the armholes, and I had no issue with any of these popping through to the right side or like peeking out, so they're all staying where they're supposed to, which is very nice. As far as sewing the zipper in, so I had this little cord that I had created, and I basted the zipper in by hand with a very contrasting color thread so I could easily see it. And then I used a back stitch, so again, stitching by hand, and I basically stitched in the ditch right next to this cord. And here is what this looks like on the inside. So because I used a machine sewing thread that very closely matched the color of the zipper, you really can't see it. And the zipper tape is not pretty, but you don't see it at all. And I feel like this is one of those things that maybe it bothers me when I'm working on the garment and I want to have a really nice finish for it. But then once I have the garment to the point where I can wear it and it's like finished enough, this actually isn't really bothering me on the inside. I don't know if I will do any more work here. I did get a ribbon that I could sew on the inside and cover up these ends, but I think that might just be adding unnecessary bulk at this point. So I'll probably leave it as is. And I just want to give you a little bit closer look at the armhole. So this was the finishing where I knit a couple of rounds and then tacked down the live stitches to the inside. You can see, again, the steek stitches behaving themselves. And I really like this finish. It's sort of like binding an edge, like binding the edge of a quilt or something like that. It's really easy to do, and it gives an extremely clean edge from the front. So if you like, you know, a stockinette looking edge, but you don't want it to roll, this is maybe a good technique for that. The other thing I talked about a little bit was, because I was making this to fit my particular shape and my back is very broad, you can see that the back actually is a little bit wider than the front on both sides. And then I just decreased those stitches out so that I had the same amount of stitches for each shoulder and then the back neck wasn't too wide. So there we have it. So what I would like to do now is do a little recap of my trip with some of the footage that I took. The drive up to Montreal was about 5.5 hours for me, and the countryside was absolutely beautiful, so it was a really pleasant drive. I stopped in Vermont on the way for some lunch at a little tiny cafe that seemed to be the spot to go for people from miles around. It was in a little tiny rural town about 45 minutes from the border. There was very little drama at the border crossing, which was really nice, and then it was just maybe another hour to actually get into Montreal, where I met Salma and Mega at La Maison Tricoté. This was a really nice yarn store, and I was really amped up from seeing my friends for the first time in a while, and I wasn't really in a shopping headspace, unfortunately, but I really liked seeing a bunch of different popular yarns that I haven't had the chance to see in person yet, like a lot of the Knitting for Olive yarns and also the De Rerum Natura line. They had a lot of these yarns that I hadn't had the chance to see in person because we don't have them around where I live. After that, we went to an absolutely amazing buttons and notion store called Rick's Rex. And again, I didn't go in with a plan, so I immediately got overwhelmed by how extensive and beautiful the selection was. She had new and vintage buttons, and it was clear that she was very passionate about like scouring for the right buttons to bring into her shop. And I mean, if you're ever in Montreal, really try to go there and try to go with a plan so you can actually buy stuff. From that point, we went over to our Airbnb, which was only a couple blocks away from the venue for the festival, which was really nice, but it was extremely busy. It was like rush hour in Montreal at the time, and we had 2 cars between the 3 of us. And so as soon as we got the cars stashed away in a parking garage for the entire weekend, a lot of stress was lifted off of us. One of the things that we had planned to do was a yarn swap between the 3 of us. So we each picked from our stash things that we didn't think we were going to use or things that we'd be happy to trade, and we just had a free-for-all in the Airbnb. So when we first got up there, we just immediately started laying stuff out and looking at what the others had brought and sort of eyeing what we might want. And luckily, I think we're all in a place where we really like sort of different things right now. Like Mego was really looking for bright, rich colors, and I'm sort of in like a chill color phase. All of the yarns that Selma and Mega brought were beautiful, and I'll show you some of the ones that I picked out at the end of the video. After that, we went out to dinner at what was essentially a giant food court, except had really nice restaurants there, like really interesting food and places you could drink and all of that. So we ended up eating dinner there. We met up with Nancy from Knit City Montreal. After dinner, we went back to the Airbnb and sat and chatted and knit, and it was delightful. The next morning we got up, not too early. We were planning to be at the festival, I think between 9 and 10, closer to 10 a.m. And so we got up, we got ready, we went and got a little bit of breakfast on the way, and like I said, it was just a short 2-block walk to the Sheraton where the festival is being held. So I'll put in a little bit of footage from the festival. It was very busy at the beginning of the day, and I would suggest if you're not a person who likes crowds, maybe wait until the early afternoon, because it definitely tapered off towards the end of the day and was a lot more manageable to actually get into booths to see things. The lineup of vendors was really impressive. I would say there was definitely a focus on hand dyers, but a lot of them came with very interesting bases. Like, not everybody is dyeing on the same old superwash yarn bases anymore. There are all kinds of interesting things out there now, and I was really happy to see that, and I ended up buying a couple of sweater quantities that I'll show you later. In addition to hand dyers, there were yarn shops there. There was Sonder Yarn Co., where I ended up buying a little bit of yarn as well. There was really a nice lineup of folks. I'm sort of used to going to festivals that are a little bit more like farm focused, and this festival was definitely more like city folks. There were lots of people with very like chic outfits on, which was interesting because I feel like the festivals I usually go to have more of like a wacky art teacher vibe, which I fully lean into, but it was really cool to see how different people are wearing their knits, and it gave me a lot of ideas for the future. We had an early afternoon lunch and sat and knit and chatted with a couple people, which was really nice, and then went back in for round 2 of shopping. And by this time the festival was definitely a little bit calmer and more chill. The one complaint that I would have about the venue is that there just wasn't good lighting there. A lot of the vendors had brought their own lighting, but there was something about like the tone of the overhead light seemed very yellow, and it was hard to see the exact colors that everyone had out, which was a shame. There was a little area where there were some vendors sort of on the outside of the main room that had a lot of natural light, and I could see those colors a lot better. So that was just one thing that made it a little bit difficult, but certainly didn't prevent me from buying a couple things. And then after we left, we went back to the Airbnb to catch our breath for a little bit, and then we went out to dinner at a restaurant that we could actually see from our Airbnb. So we had a nice dinner and just hung out, talked again, went back to the Airbnb, knit, drank some wine, had some chocolates, and that was it. That was the trip. So short and sweet. I would definitely attend this festival again. I really enjoyed the lineup of vendors at the festival. I really enjoyed seeing a lot of the Canadian hand dyers that I wasn't familiar with before this. And I really enjoyed Montreal, actually. I'm not a city person at all anymore, and I wasn't expecting to like it there as much as I did, and I would really like to go back. For some reason, I didn't realize Montreal is so close. It's like a 5-hour drive. It's really not far for me, and I mean, it's reasonable to maybe make a long weekend trip up there and hang out and eat food and walk around and see things. So hopefully I'll do that in the future too. So let me show you some of the yarn that I got that weekend, both in the swap and what I got at the festival. I'm not going to show you everything, especially not everything I got in the swap, because it was a little bit excessive. I think I maybe came home with more yarn than I left with, which is not great for my storage situation, but whatever. So one of the patterns that I had wanted to shop for yarn for at the festival is Xiao Mai, which came out in the La Bien-Aimée Neons and Neutrals book that recently came out here. And I actually tried on the sample at the festival, and I didn't like how it fit. There's something going on with the shoulders where it was very clear that it was just going to continually fall off my shoulders, which is not a problem that I usually have because my shoulders are quite square, and usually cardigans will sit on them quite easily. But it made me think like maybe I need to reassess, like I can use that stitch pattern that I like so much on that garment and put it on something that has a little bit of a different shape. So Selma had brought some yarn for me that was like deep, deep stash for her. And I think I'm going to try to use this to make my version of a reshaped Xiao Mai. So this stuff I would guess is maybe from the 80s, maybe even earlier, Chaboté. It is a super funky, like bulky, thick and thin, sort of tweedy yarn. And she brought this because she knew I would love it, and I immediately did. I beelined for it in the yarn swap. And so she had a good amount of it too. I think maybe around 600 grams. So I'm thinking I want to use this to make some sort of open front cardigan that incorporates that very interesting stitch pattern from Xiao Mai. So that is one thing I'm really excited about at the moment. And the other yarn that I got from Selma, which I am very excited about, is this, which is woolly knit. So I did not get involved in the woolly knit craze that happened, I don't know, last year, whenever it was, that there were a couple other podcasters really going ham on woolly knit. And I managed to not order any, so I hadn't seen it yet, but she had 600 grams of this and had decided it wasn't quite the right color for her. I hope it's the right color for me. I don't know if it is or not, but I love this color so much that I sort of don't care. And so I would like to make another half and half wrap. That's what I'm thinking at the moment. There's enough here to do probably a sweater and a half and half. I have a half and half wrap that I made in the original colors, like the bright poppy red and the kiln red. And I wear it a lot. I wasn't expecting to actually wear that a whole lot for some reason. It just seemed like a big blanket, but I find myself wearing it a lot, so I sort of would like another one. And the other yarn that I will be pairing for it is from Mega that I got in the yarn swap, and that is this color of linen quill, which is oatmeal gray. It's sort of a marled version of the linen quill. So that I think will be a nice combo for a half and half wrap. Another thing I got in the yarn swap from Mega was a sweater quantity of this Rowan Alpaca Classic, which is alpaca and cotton blend, which is very interesting. It's very light, maybe a DK light worsted weight. I've been getting more interested in experimenting with these yarns that are very lightweight, but intended to be knit at like a DK or worsted or Aran weight gauge, because I like that look of a chunky garment, but I don't like the weight of it. And so I think this will make a beautiful, very warm and lightweight garment. Then the last yarn I'm going to show you from the swap is some yarn I got from Mega. Again, this is 2 different colors of Samnasgarn Lina, which is another yarn that I hadn't ever seen in person before. So she used this color for one of her recent finished garments. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's a Thea Coleman pattern. And then this one, I'm not sure if this was left over or if she had just decided not to use it. But I have 3 skeins of each color, and Selma had suggested this would make a nice striped summer top of some sort, so I am on the lookout for a pattern for that. As far as yarn that I purchased at the festival, I have 3 sweater quantities to show you. I did a pretty good job of walking around the entire festival and looking at everything before buying. And so this was the one that broke the seal, if you will. Ancient Arts is the dyer, and this is their Lesko Fine, which is 25% Manx Lockton, which I think is a primitive breed. I have never knitted with Manx Lockton before, but I'm very interested too. And so it's 25% of that, 75% Punta Arenas wool. I do not know what that is either. And it's a fingering weight. So I have 4 skeins of this color, which is called Davy Jones Locker. And I don't have a plan for it. So my approach now, I used to really make sure that I had an exact pattern in mind when I was buying yarn. Now my approach is I make sure to buy enough so that I can do a variety of different things. So in the past, I would maybe buy 3 skeins of fingering weight, around 1,200 yards. And a lot of the time that is cutting it too close. So now I just buy 4 skeins, maybe 5. And then I have enough to do something heavily cabled or basically whatever I want. So I did get 4 skeins of this. No plan yet. The second thing that I bought, which I had identified on the first go around of the festival, like I really wanted to go back to this dyer's booth, was this one. So the dyer for this is called Mai Apa. She had a bunch of really beautiful purples and blues that I was drawn to immediately. And I was initially looking at something that was a little bit more blue than this, but then I sort of kept going back to this lavender color and eventually decided to go with this one. So this is her BFL Gotland fingering base. You can see the halo on this yarn. It's non-superwash, 75% BFL, 25% Gotland. And this is just gonna make an absolutely beautiful, I'm thinking cabled cardigan. That's the thought at the moment. Maybe also baubles. I got 5 skeins of this so I can make quite a long garment as well, and I'm very excited to try this yarn out. And then the last one that I'm going to show you is from Sonder Yarn Co. And I really agonized about whether to get this or to wait because I can easily order Sonder Yarn Co. Online. I feel like their photos online are very representative of what the yarn actually looks like. And I did eventually cave and buy my sweater quantity at the festival. And the thing that I really love about some of these non-superwash yarns is that they will get this beautiful halo in a garment once it gets just a little bit worn that almost looks like mohair, but there's no mohair in it. And this is one of those blends, this BFL Massa. So as Mega and I were walking around, so we sort of tend to team up at the festivals and we like getting each other's opinions on everything. And we just lose Salma almost immediately because everybody knows her and she just ends up like buzzing around and socializing. So Mega and I end up going around the festival together usually. And so we had seen a person that I was like, look at that person's sweater, like I need to find out what that pattern is. We were both looking at it like it looks familiar, but we can't quite tell what the pattern is. And so I interrupted this poor person's conversation and said, you know, excuse me, what pattern are you wearing? Because it's fantastic. And it was the Arctic Light sweater. And so that pattern is written for a yarn to be held together with a mohair, I believe. But I think I might be able to get the same effect with just one strand of this. So I'm going to have to swatch to see. But the plan for this is to do a very heavily cabled sweater of the same type. So if it's not the Arctic Light pattern, that's fine, but this is going to be a cabled sweater. So that is the Sonder Yarn Co. Sunday Morning DK in the flat white colorway. So I think that's all I have for you today. So thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.